Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Rowan Bosworth Davies, a former fraud squad detective and now a blogger on matters relating to fraud in the city of London. Rowan, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
It's great to be back, Max.
All right, Rowan. Thanks to Edward Snowden, it's been revealed that a vast surveillance state is collecting data on us, allegedly to protect us from a remote chance of harm by religious terrorists. And yet, all around us is the very real and present danger of financial harm by banksters, and the state does nothing. Your thoughts on this double standard?
Well, I think it goes back to something that an American sociologist said in as far back as 1949, a man called Edwin Sutherland, who wrote he was the man that coined the phrase white-collar crime. He wrote this amazing book in which he pointed out that there was, as he put it, a consistent bias in society between those who committed certain kinds of, if you like, wrongdoings that the state wished to prohibit, and those who engaged in money and the manipulation of money, what he called the upper socioeconomic classes. Bit fancy phrase, but what he was talking about was the business class. And what he said was that society, judges, regulators, all these kind of people, he said they have an empathy with bankers and with lawyers and with accountants. And he said they fail to be able to understand. They simply cannot see them in the space of criminality. So consequently, he said they always are willing to bend over backwards to support business, because they fail to put business into the same category as they put organized crime.
Okay, so the language in the law, it does not support prosecution of white-collar criminals because it does not adequately characterize or define their behavior in terms of criminality. And I bring this up because our friend Luc Saucier, who's an attorney and former banker in Paris, has been working to introduce language into French legislature that would equate what Jamie Dimon does, or what Bob Diamond does, or what George Osborne does when he's acting for the bankers, as the equivalent of financial rape or financial pedophilia. So in other words, what the French are saying is, if we change the language of the law and we accuse Jamie Dimon or Bob Diamond of financial rape, then the public will get it in their nut, as our friend the artist taxi driver would say, that what's going on here is serious, not just some minor paper shuffling without a victim, but it's the equivalent of pedophilia, and if you don't support pedophilia, then you would not support Bob Diamond or the former head of RBS or what George Osborne does. What about this approach about changing the language in the law itself?
I personally have no problem with that. I mean, I myself said many years ago that crime is actually what you call it. And that we should be addressing what's going on inside the banking sector and calling it by its real name. That the real name I apply to it is organized enterprise crime.
Well, that would be a racket, a criminal syndicate.
Absolutely. And that was what I said to thee. That is the evidence I gave to the Banking Commission.
That you observed a racket, a syndicate, a criminal organization.
And I sent them evidence. I used the definitions of organized crime used by the US, the UK, Europe, and Australia. And I took those 4 definitions and I applied them to what is going on at Barclays and HBOS and HSBC and all these other people. And I said, there is absolutely no distinction between what the mafia does by these definitions and what the UK banking sector is doing.
Now, in the U.S., typically...
By the way, Max,
yes,
they suppressed my evidence. They did not. They refused to accept it.
Meaning what?
They lost it.
How did that work exactly? You're a former copper.
Yeah.
Okay. You gave evidence. You pointed out to an organized criminal activity, a racket.
I sent them the report, and they subsequently lost it.
Did they say it was in the Twin Towers when it blew up?
No.
How can they justify that they lost it?
Well, that's what they did. And eventually, because I kept pressing and pressing and pressing, that I eventually got a letter from the chairman of the committee, Mr. Tyree, in which he admitted to me that, actually, Mr. Bosworth, we did ultimately receive your report. We were ultimately shown it. Too late to do certain things with it, but we did get your report and it was submitted. Now, I'm going to be the only person that gave evidence to that committee.
The law in the UK is different in the US in that you have committees, they look at stuff, they have an opinion, but it's not like you've got activist district attorneys who can really, like a Rudy Giuliani in New York.
No, but that's because
he went after the mob as a political move.
That's because in America there is a much stronger emphasis for young prosecutors, young law enforcers, to go out there and to really go after the big targets, because it helps them immensely if they have political ambitions. Giuliani's a classic case. Giuliani brought down the pizza connection, and suddenly, he's all over the place.
So in the UK, the way the justice system is set up is that there's no room for an enterprising young lawyer to go after mobsters, or in this case, banksters, as a political, ambitious move. It's just not set up like that.
No young lawyer or prosecutor is going to have much of a career if he or she sets his target on a series of senior banksters and goes after them, because it would be very quickly made known to him.
Okay, let me ask you this then. In the case of the London whale from J.P. Morgan, in the case of AIG, in the case of Bernie Madoff, in the case of the Lehman collapse, in the case of the LIBOR scandal, in the case of the newly revealed Forex trading scandal, all of the major scandals have their nexus in the city of London. And people characterize the city as where bankers go to outsource their fraud for a couple of reasons. They have the least regulated financial markets in the world, and apparently what you're saying is another element here. There's no way that you can adequately prosecute financial terrorism in this city.
But there is no incentive for the regulator, and there is no incentive, there has hitherto been no incentive for the Serious Fraud Office to go in there and to go after these people aggressively and dynamically. I'm not talking about doing things they shouldn't do.
What about this situation where the Serious Fraud Office was investigating the slush fund between Prince Bandar of Saudi Arabia and Tony Blair regarding the British aerospace slush fund? This was covered in the Financial Times, and apparently Bandar threatened Blair by saying, if you don't call off this slush fund investigation, I can't guarantee there won't be another 7/7 terrorist act in the city of London, whereupon Blair folded like a cheap tent. Were you shocked by that?
Well, I was shocked by the fact that the SFO were forced to back off. I wasn't aware, by the way, that there was a threat of terrorist activity.
It was covered in the FT. Bandar, and he repeated it recently. He threatened Russia with terrorist activity in Russia if if Russia didn't go Saudi's way in the Syria conflict. So once again, Prince Bandar threatened terrorism.
Well, I believe you. It's just that I wasn't aware of it. I mean, my understanding was that the threat was, if you carry on with this investigation, all kinds of super-duper goody contracts which you might otherwise win, you won't win. But whatever
the record shows, he made reference to 7/7 terrorist act in London. That's part of the public record.
Okay, but whatever the catalyst, what shocked me was that, first of all, the Serious Fraud, because I knew the director, the then director of the Serious Fraud Office, who was a hell of a good man. I mean, and it shocked me that.
But not a good regulator. He's a good man, but a crap regulator.
He was doing what he could do under the constraints that are applied to British prosecutors and regulators. And they will,
it gets back to the original question, Rowan, which is that here you have the state, which we know from the Edward Snowden revelations, operating a vast illegal surveillance operation, and many times at the behest of corporations as part of corporate espionage and insider tradings to get an edge in their hedge fund activity, having absolutely nothing to do with protection or defense. These are the same people that make the case that they need to make these incredible invasive machinations to completely destroy any sense of civil rights or human rights in this country. So where do they get off making this huge double standard? In other words, where do they get off saying that on one hand, everyone's a terrorist until proven innocent when it relates to non-bankers, but when it relates to bankers, they're all innocent forever and for more because we are too lily-livered and cowardice to do anything about it?
I think what we have to look at is the role of the City of London in its relationship with the UK PLC. I used to believe that the city was merely the adjunct that supports the support service for the economic support of the country, in the same way as policemen were there to enforce the law, that teachers were there to educate our minds, and doctors were there to help us maintain our health. That was a very naive belief, because I realized, and it's something I realized more recently, is that actually the city is a complete law unto itself.
Okay, I understand, Ron, but let's be clear what the stakes are. They're propagating terrorism. They finance terrorism. HSBC financed terrorism directly. That's the stake. Their Mexicans that are decapitated are thanks to HSBC, full stop. Those are the stakes. And the government, this government, doesn't give a flying crap about it, and that's unconscionable. But let's talk about some more interesting aspects of UK law. They've got these new IPNAs, injunctions to prevent nuisance and annoyance. This is on top of the ASBOs that they give people. Right. These are people that are hardworking people that the cops go in and harass them for a nickel and dime, like a shakedown operation in some third world country they got now in the UK. What's this all about? Is this just more, nickel and diming of the population? It's just another shakedown by the government to make impoverished people even more impoverished. We only have about 20 seconds.
Well, I think when you come to look at these new penalties, what we have is a government that is obsessed by crime in the minutiae, crime on the streets, crime that influences and impacts upon the average Joe in the street. His car being broken into, his house being burgled, shoplifting. All that
because
kind of
the Daily Mail makes it look like they're tough on crime, and they let the terrorists go free.
Well,
We're out of time, unfortunately, Rowan. I got to cut you off there. Don't put me in cuffs, all right? Are you going to arrest me? Do you have cuffs on you?
Not with me.
You don't carry your cuffs? Not even the pink furry type?
No, not anymore.
Okay. That's all the time. We got to cut it off there. We have you on back soon, Rowan. Thanks so much again for being on the Keiser Report.
As always, Max, it's a joy.